Guys, in this video, we're going to be learning about acids and bases, and more specifically, three definitions or theories about acids and bases. But on this slide, I just wanted to outline some big ideas in this unit, which there are videos on as well. So we have the three definitions or theories by Boyle, Arrhenius, and Bronsted-Lowry. Then we have the idea of neutralization, uh, concentration versus strength, and then strong acids, strong bases, weak bases, and then we have the pH scale and the different formulas with pH. But for now, in this video, we're going to be looking at the definitions or theories of acids and bases. So first, let's look at Boyle, what Boyle first thought. So Boyle was one of the first to label substances as either an acid or a base, and he actually called bases alkalis. And he labeled substances as acids or bases based off of the following characteristics, which I have outlined here. So his definitions for acids and bases were very simple, but there are others that built off of his ideas as well. So yeah, this is what Boyle first thought about acids and bases. Acids had to be sour, corrosive to metals, change litmus red, become less acidic when mixed with bases. And then bases, they had to feel slippery, change litmus blue, and become less basic when mixed with acids. Something really important to look at with Boyle is that this idea that acids become less acidic when mixed with bases, and bases become less basic when mixed with acids. So this kind of plays into the idea of like neutralization and how acids and bases are related to one another. So while Boyle and a lot of other scientists try to explain why acids and bases behave the way they do, the first really reasonable definition of acids and bases was actually proposed like 200 years later by a scientist named Arrhenius. And one of his big ideas that he proposed was that water can dissolve many compounds by separating them into their individual ions. And he suggested that acids are compounds that contain hydrogen and that can dissolve in water to release hydrogen ions into the solution. So an example I have here in red, if we have HCl and we dissolve it in water, the following reaction occurs where we get the hydrogen ions, so H plus, and then we have the chlorine ions, and it's in an aqueous solution, so in water. But the big idea is that this acid contain hydrogen, and then when in water, it releases the hydrogen ion. So that follows Arrhenius's definition, if you will. And then bases are substances that dissolve in water to release hydroxide ions, so OH minus, into the solution, according to Arrhenius. And here in blue is an example as well. So Arrhenius's theory explains why all acids and bases have similar properties to each other. For example, all acids release an H plus into the solution, and all bases release an OH minus into the solution. And Arrhenius's definition also explains Boyle's observation that acids and bases counteract each other. And this idea that a base can make an acid weaker or vice versa is that idea of neutralization, which we're going to talk about at the end of this video. So the last scientist we're going to look at is actually the last theory I should say is we're going to look at the Bronsted-Lowry acids and bases. So let's go to that. And so Bronsted, two scientists, one named Bronsted and one named Lowry, pretty much published independent yet similar papers that redefine Arrhenius's theory of acids and bases. So the Bronsted-Lowry definition of an acid is very similar to the Arrhenius definition, saying that any substance can donate it's any substance that can donate a hydrogen ion, and these are referred to as proton donors in the Bronsted-Lowry acid and base definition. But the thing that's different, that's really different actually, is the definition for a base, and it's any substance that can accept a hydrogen ion. So in the case for the Arrhenius definition, we said a base was when dissolved in water release a hydroxide ion. But then we have the Bronsted-Lowry definition. It's any substance that can accept a hydrogen ion. So that's the main difference. And this is pretty much showing that a base is really the opposite of an acid. So an acid donates the hydrogen ion, the base accepts it. So for example, if we have like NaOH or KOH, those would be bases in both the Arrhenius and Bronsted-Lowry definitions. But however, the Bronsted-Lowry definition also allows for the explanation for why substances that don't contain an OH minus can act like bases, which under the Arrhenius definition of acids and bases wouldn't follow. So for example, baking soda, which is NaHCO3, that does not have like a hydroxide ion or an OH minus in there at all, but it acts like a base, as it can accept a hydrogen ion when like with an acid. So the Bronsted-Lowry definition further expands upon the Arrhenius definition as it explains why substances that don't contain an OH minus can also act like bases. And with the Bronsted-Lowry definition, it also goes into the idea that of amphoteric substances. So these are compounds that can act as both a Bronsted-Lowry acid and a Bronsted-Lowry base. So water is a good example. Also, some of the polyatomic ions are also amphoteric. And then when we have an acid-base like reaction, there's Bronsted-Lowry. There's also Bronsted-Lowry conjugate acid-base pairs. So a conjugate acid is the species formed after the base accepts a proton, and the conjugate base is the species formed after an acid donates its proton. So the conjugate acids and bases are on the product side, and they're pretty much like the product that's left over after the base either accepts a proton, and that would be the conjugate acid, or the species is formed after the acid donates its proton, and that would be the conjugate base. So for an example, if we have HCl plus H2O yields, and it's yielding us H3O plus, which is also another, it's like H plus, and then Cl minus. So the HCl is an acid, water is acting as a base, because it's going to accept the hydrogen ion from the HCl, and then the H3O plus on the product side is an acid, and the Cl minus is the base. So as we can see in this reaction, the water, right, on the product side accepted the hydrogen from the acid, and then that's leaving us with the Cl minus, which came from this acid. So HCl donates its proton, and so the Cl minus ion is formed and is like leftover, you can think about it, and it is the conjugate base of HCl. So that is the Bronsted-Lowry, kind of all the ideas that came along with their theories. So now let's look at the idea of neutralization really quick. So before we were talking about how Arrhenius kind of explained Boyle's observation that acids and bases counteract each other, and this is through the process of neutralization. So when you have an acid plus a base, you're always going to yield water plus a salt. So here in this table are some examples. So you just have to remember that the reaction always produces water and a salt, and that's neutralization. So I hope this video helped you understand some different theories of acids and bases, and they kind of all build off on each other. It's really important to understand the key differences, like how Boyle was clearly kind of like physical properties, and it was very simplistic. Arrhenius was just based off of the idea of releasing H plus or OH minus into water, and then Bronsted-Lowry had the idea of being a donor or an acceptor of a hydrogen ion, and then conjugate acid-base pairs, which is really key to understand. So I hope this video helped. Check out our other videos on acids and bases.